Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin the Hilchos Naarah Betulah, the fourth out of the 5 halachas that are in the Sefer Noshim, the Book of Women, where we discuss the laws of the virgin maiden, which the Rambam discusses the problems that could arise in the marital relationship of that of a Naarah Betulah, whether before Kedushin, which is Einis Mafata, which is if she's raped or violated, which is going to be the topic of this first parak, or the habits after Kedushin regarding when the husband talks about a mistake that he had regarding this Betulah, that is the halacha of Meitzi Shemra, which, still, like we said, the first parak is going to discuss that of the knas, the penalty of the Einis Mafata. Parak Beis is to discuss the other payments, and the third parak is to discuss that of the Meitzi Shemra. Says Ram, Yesh b'chlol chamesh mitzvahs. In these halachas, there's categorical 5 mitzvahs. Shalosh mitzvahs, say 3 positive commandments, or 2 mitzvahs, let's say, and 2 negative prohibitions. And these are their specifics. Aleph, 1 is liknus hamafata, to penalize the one who seduced a girl to have relations, which he was not married to. Beis is sheyiso einis anusasai, that the rapist has to marry the woman that he violated. Gimel is shli gorish einis, the one who raped the girl is not allowed to divorce her. Dalit sheteshiv eshes meitzi shemer tachas ba'al lo'elam, that if a man spreads a bad word about this woman that he married, he's never allowed to ever divorce her. Hey, ishlei gorish meitzi shemer es ishtay, so that's a positive commandment, should stay married, and that he's not supposed to divorce his wife, that's a negative prohibition. Uber mitzvahs elu, and the explanation of these commandments is by Prokem elu, are in these 3 chapters. So begin Parak Rishon in the first chapter, like we said, discusses the biblical penalty, the knas, of the einis if a man violates forcibly a girl, or mafata, or if he seduces her, he convinces her to be with him. So halacha al Rambam opens up qualifying this halacha of einis and mafata. Misha pita besulah, if someone seduced a girl, which he talked her into having relations with him, we penalize him a weight of 50 slime of shalkesa mezukah, of refined silver, pure silver, and that's what's called kanas, a penalty. Also, if he not only if he seduced her, like we're talking about, which is mafata, but if he forced her, if he violated her, he has to pay a penalty. Now, kanas, and this penalty, mitzvah seseshal Torah, is a positive commandment of the Torah, which is what we opened up, that we said is the first of the 5 mitzvahs. Shalom says in the pasuk in Devarim, the man who lay with her has to give her lavia Naarah, to the father of the girl, chemishim kasav, these 50 silver coins. Halacha Beis. Ve'ezehu mafata, ve'ezehu einis. What is considered in the classification of seduce, and what's included in that of forcing. So mafata, seducing, is l'ritzaina, if she ultimately consents. Einis, force, is shabola bal karcha, where he cohabits with her forcibly against her will. Now, sometimes we don't know. So it says around like this: Kol nevelas basada. If the cohabitation was out in the fields, hariza becheskes anusa, we could presume that she was raped, that she was forced. The dananaisa, but then anusa, we qualify her with the halachic status of anusa, which, as we'll describe, has certain halachic differences in that of mefuta, of seduced. Until witnesses come along and testify that she actually cohabited consensually, until we know, we're going to presume that it was forced. Whereas but if the cohabitation was in the city, we're going to presume that it was seduced, because she didn't scream out, which people would hear her in the city. And the fact that she didn't must have been, in the field, no one's going to hear her anyway. But in the city, she could scream and be heard, and she didn't. So we're going to presume that she did it consensually, until witnesses testify that no, that she was raped, that she was violated. For example, where he took out a sword and he said to her, if you scream, I'm going to kill you. So then the witnesses obviously could testify that she was raped and she didn't scream simply because she was afraid for her life. Halacha Gimel. The obligation to marry the woman that he seduced or violated. Halacha Gimel. Hamafuta shlei ratza li nasl mafata. Let's say the woman who is seduced doesn't want to marry this man that seduced her in cohabiting with her. Or the father doesn't want to go ahead and give his daughter over to this man who seduced his daughter, which we learn that from the Pesukim, that both of them could refuse not to let him get married to her. Or if he, and this is what's different between seduction and rape, if he doesn't want to marry, where he's also allowed to refuse it. So then, if he doesn't marry, whether because he's refusing or they're refusing, How is it nice and knas v'hailach? So he gives the penalty, which we mentioned, the amount of 50 silver coins, and then he leaves. We don't force him to marry her. Now, but if they all are in agreement, he seduced her, and now everyone wants the marriage to go ahead, and he marries her. So then, then he doesn't pay the penalty. Now, the other payments, as we'll see in the second paragraph regarding her embarrassment and deficiency, that he has to give to the father right away, whether he marries her or not. But regarding the penalty, regarding the actual cohabitation, that he doesn't have to pay. That's only if he doesn't consummate the relationship. Rather, what he does is he writes for a ksuba like all other virgins, which the ksuba is going to be 200 din. And now, although he really cohabited with her, and by the time they get married, she's a Betulah, we don't say that she's only going to get 100, which is that of a Betulah, because if that would be the case, comes out because he sinned and he seduced her, he's going to gain, and he made her deficient, made her down to 100. It's not appropriate that he should gain through his sin. Rather, he has to give her a ksuba like a regular Betulah. Now, Aval Hanusa, but if she was raped, so if she or her father refuses to get married to this rapist, her shusbiyadim, they're permitted to refuse. But then he gives the penalty and he leaves. But let's say she and her father wants now him to stay in this relationship, when he doesn't want to, we force him, and he gets married and he has to give the penalty. It says in the pasuk, and to him she will be for a wife. That's the positive commandment. And even if she's lame, or she's blind, or she has tzaras, we force him to marry her. Where he started this thing, he has to continue with this. He can never willingly divorce her forever. Shlomo says in the pasuk, he cannot send her away all the days of his life. That's a negative prohibition. So there's a positive commandment and negative prohibition, like we mentioned in the introduction, where that's halacha regarding an einus that he cannot refuse if they want to go ahead with the marriage. Halacha dal. Now, but this woman doesn't get a ksuba. Why? The rabbis only instituted the ksuba for the woman that it shouldn't be easy just to get rid of her because he realizes the financial element over here. Like we said, he cannot divorce her anyway, so there's no reason for him to have to write her a ksuba. Now, Allah hey, but let's say this woman that he raped was forbidden to him from Torah law. Even if it's only a positive commandment, or even the secondary error that's rabbinic. Then they shouldn't marry her. And so let's say he finds licentiousness regarding this woman after he had already married her, where he was married to her and she was mezana, she had relations with another man, because if she was mezana before he married her, that's not a problem. But in this case, then he should divorce her. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that for him she should be a wife, which is isha rulay, a befitting wife. But if she's forbidden because of Torah law, or because she was mezana, then he divorces him. Halacha vav. Kohen gadol she'anas besula. If a kohen gadol, a high priest, if he rapes a virgin, or he seduces her, here also is an exception to the rule. So here he doesn't marry her. Again, because Torah law is overriding, because he's commanded to marry a virgin. By the time after he raped her, by the time it's coming time to get married, she's not a Betulah anymore. If he marries her, then Yotze beged, then he has to divorce her with a get, because even the woman that he himself raped or violated is included in the Isser of when he's coming to get married. Ultimately, she's not a Betulah. So again, then the law would not mandate and would not sanction his marrying that anusim. Halacha zayin. Although, like we mentioned before, that regarding when there's a rape, when it was forced, Torah tells us he cannot send her away. No, but kivan shekadamei asay, since the Torah writes the positive commandment before it writes the negative prohibition. Shlomo says in the pasuk, it says v'loisi liisha, that for him she should be a wife, which is a positive commandment. And at the end of the pasuk it says, and he lo yichol l'shalcha, says the negative prohibition, he cannot send her away. So I raise in the taka la'aseh, that's what's called, it's uprooted for the positive commandment. Meaning, since it comes out zoy mitzvahs leisa say shenit la'aseh, this is a negative prohibition which could be fixed, that can be uprooted by a positive commandment. You don't get lashes on that. Unless you don't fulfill the positive commandment in it, like when explained in Hilchos Sanhedrin, which in Perek Yud Ches. Now, but that's what we call lav hanitik la'aseh. If it's a negative prohibition that can be ameliorated with a positive commandment, like noiser, you're not supposed to leave over the carbon, you did. Okay, so then go ahead and burn it, which is a mitzvah aseh, or not to steal, you did. Hashavas gezela. So here also, there's a positive commandment that tells you, don't divorce her. You did, well, loisi elisha. As the Rambam explains, therefore, if the one who raped the girl, if he violated and he divorced her, we force him to take her back. Like it doesn't get lashes, it's menutik la'aseh. It says if you did the wrong thing, then you can fix it by taking her back. Now, but what happens if, let's say, the woman had divorced, which he's not supposed to? He's violated negative prohibition of divorcing her, which generally there's lashes, but here there's not lashes because it's menutik la'aseh. You can fix it by doing positive commandment. But let's say the woman that he unlawfully divorced, she died before he could remarry her, or in the meantime she got engaged to someone else, which he's not allowed to take back his gerusha when she gets engaged to someone else. Or he was a kain, where he's forbidden in the woman that was divorced, even his own. Then he's going to get lashes. Because he violated the negative prohibition of divorcing her. He cannot fulfill the mitzvah commandment, the positive commandment of taking her back. For whatever the reason, like we said, for all the different cases, like a kain, because she's a gerusha, and therefore it's not netik la'aseh, and therefore there's a negative prohibition, which when one violates a la'aseh, he gets lashes. Now, an alachas, the Rambam qualifies this obligation of the knas, of einis mefata. He says, Eino einis mefata chayv beknas. The rapist or the seducer is not liable for the penalty, but the Torah tells us, at sheyavu leo kedarka, unless he cohabited with her in the regular vaginal way, uve'edim, and with witnesses, because if there's no witnesses, even if he admits on his own, he wouldn't pay the penalty, as Rambam is going to explain in the next parak. But ve'in tzarich hasra, it doesn't have to be warned. That's only for lashes or for a death penalty. He has to be warned. But here, regarding the knas, it doesn't have to be warned. Now, from what age is the girl fit to be obligating in, if he raped her or seduced her, to be liable for this penalty? It's when she's over 3 years, a complete 3 years old, until she becomes a begeres, which we explain in Hilchos Ish exactly when that is. Now, but if, let's say, he cohabited with her when she was within her first 3 years since she was born, then that cohabitation is not considered an act of bia, because the virginity, the besulim, they come back. Now, and let's say he had bia with her after she already over, let's say, the age of 12 and a half, when she was begeres. There's no penalty, like it says in the pasuk, Naarah Betulah, the maiden virgin, which is a Naarah, which is the first step of adulthood, but it's 6 months before begeres, loya begeres, which is not including that a begeres, and therefore there wouldn't be a knas if it's under 3, or if it's over, let's say, approximately 12 and a half. Halacha test. Now, whether if this girl has a father, or she doesn't have a father, yesh knas, the halacha is that she gets this penalty for being seduced or being forced. Now, the only difference, however, is if she's a yisoima that was seduced, then she wouldn't get a knas, because the knas goes to herself when she has no father, and since she consented, well, she was meichlam, because she obviously did it with consent, as Rambam explained this halacha. Now, the elu she'en knas, these are women who don't get the knas. Habegeres, like we mentioned in the previous halacha, when she's over the age of 12 and a half, or v'me'enes, or if she was a minor who was married, which she refused that marriage, so it's like, although it's like she was never married, but we don't presume her to be in a chazaka that she has virginity because she was ultimately married, or v'aylanis, which an aylanis doesn't have these days of nairis. Rather, as the Ram explained in the second paragraph of Hilchos Ish, she goes from ketanus, from being a minor, to a begeres. Now, ultimately, the pasuk by knas, as we mentioned in the previous halacha, it says Naarah. Now, although the halacha is that yes, even a minor gets a knas, not just a naira, but generally a minor goes and becomes a naira. But an aylanis who categorically never has the halacha of nairis, so therefore she won't have the halacha of knas. Whereas the Ravid disagrees, holds no, an aylanis has a knas like all other minors until she's 20, which then she goes from ketanas to bagris, and then she won't have the halacha of knas like a regular begeres. Now, so too, that doesn't have a knas is v'asheita v'chareshes, a mentally deranged woman or a deaf-mute woman, where since they don't have intelligence, so we don't presume them to be still besulim, because they're not able to protect themselves. Or if someone had a bad reputation when she was a girl, and actually two witnesses came along and testified that she petitioned them to have znus with her, which, as the Ram explains in the second parak, that such a woman who really is not protecting herself. So there the Torah did not give an award, a knas, it's only for an oinus mafata. But here she's ready for these types of things. She's like a harlot, so she wouldn't get this compensation of the knas. And so too, v'hamigreshes min hanisuin, if someone's divorced from marriage, even v'adayin Naarah Betulah, even if she's still a virgin that's a Naarah, where, for example, let's say she had a chuppah, and right after the chuppah, the husband divorced her, where we presume that she didn't have biyah because they didn't even go to his house yet, still there's no knas, because the halacha always is that any time a woman goes to the chuppah, when she has nisuin, she already has the halachic status like a betulah, and therefore the husband doesn't even have the claim of besulam when he says, oh, there was no besulam. Now, if there's no claim of besulam, therefore the halachic knas will not apply, because this penalty is regarding him having had relations with a besulah. But if, let's say, she was divorced from engagement, which then we presume she's still besulah, so then if she was raped, yesh knas, she gets the knas, uknas lazma, and the knas actually goes to herself, because by the knas it says ashaloya rasa. If she was not engaged, then it goes to the father. If she was engaged, it goes to herself. In contrast to the Beish Begam, as we'll see in the second paragraph, that goes to the father, because when she's engaged, she's still not totally out of her father's domain. But the knas actually, from the biblical drashta, we say it goes to herself. And the mispatzah, now if she was seduced, the ain't knas, then she doesn't get a knas, because again, she did it consensually, and the knas goes to her, and she was meichel knas when she did it willingly. Halacha Yud. Hagiyiris, if the woman had converted to Judaism, or she was a captive woman at one point, or she was a maidservant that was freed. So in this guy, if she converted or was redeemed from captivity, or she was freed as a maidservant, and she was 3 years old or younger, so yesh la knas, then when she was subsequently raped or seduced, she will get a knas, because we presume that she's still a betulah, she's still a virgin, and even had she had biyah when she was in captivity or as a maidservant, but since she was under 3 years old, the betulah are ultimately going to come back like all other betulas. Now, but if she was over 3 years old, when she converted, when she was redeemed, when she was freed, then that she doesn't get a knas when she was ultimately violated. Because when they were still not in a protected state, their cohabitation is considered biyah. We consider them as if they had biyah, because since they're fit for biyah, and we presume in that state they were considered hefker for whichever men wanted to have relations with them. And therefore we presume that they had relations when they were not Jewish, or when they were in captivity, or when they were still a maidservant. Halacha Yud Aleph. Let's say this girl, this virgin, was forbidden on this rapist or this seducer. So if it was one of those that there's a penalty of chorus for having relations with this woman. For example, it was a he seduced or raped his sister, or dedasai, or his aunt, va'anida, or a menstruating woman. Okay, it's been anything like that that's a chiv of chorus, or there's negative prohibition. So, in history, here's where it gets interesting. If they warned him beforehand, hey, what are you doing? This is forbidden to you. Hariz al-loikas, so he's going to get lashes for having violated the negative prohibition, and he had a warning. Oh, then he's not going to pay the penalty to the woman, because that's a general halacha that kedei rishasai, a person does not have a get lashes and have to give a monetary payment. So if he's getting lashes, he's not giving a monetary payment. Now, but let's say he raped his sister or his aunt, and there was no warning. Oh, so since he doesn't get lashes only if there was a warning, then he's going to have to pay the penalty, because that is an obligation. He only doesn't pay because he's not going to have two liabilities. But if he's not getting the lashes, then he's going to have to pay the knas. Halacha Yud Beis. And this is where it's different. Before we were discussing regarding being married to such a woman. We're not getting married to them, but then we're talking about just regards to, which that's one thing, regarding the Einis Mafati, he has to stay married to them. Now we were discussing regarding the actual knas itself. That's what we're saying, how it plays out regarding if it's something you're going to get lashes, well then you're not going to have the knas, but if not, you will have the knas. Let's say let's say this woman is only forbidden based on the positive commandment, or secondary ever, which is only rabbinic, all other things that are only rabbinically forbidden. So Bain Hisr here whether he was warned, Bain Loy Hisr whether he wasn't warned, Either way he'll be liable to the Kanash in Kamalkas. Lash is only for a negative prohibition or more, not for that of Asay or Shniya, and therefore he'll be chayav the Kanas even if he has a warning. Halacha Yud Gimel. Let's say this woman that he raped was from that which is a penalty of getting actually capital punishment, getting executed by a court. For example, it was Bita, it was his daughter, or was his son's wife, his daughter-in-law, or similar things like that. So bein hisr, but here whether he was warned or bein loy hisr, but here's the chiddush the other way. Or even if he wasn't warned, before the chiddush was even if he was warned, you can be chayiv the kanas. Here it's even if he wasn't warned, patam the kanas is going to be exempt from the penalty. Why? Here you don't have Gedei Rishasa because he's not going to get executed because he wasn't warned. So why is he exempt from the payment even if he wasn't warned? Because it says in the pasuk in Shemais Chaval, it says v'loyia asan, that a man who by mistake wounded a pregnant woman and she miscarried. Now the woman herself didn't die. So v'loyia asan, there was no accident regarding the woman herself. Anish, that perpetrator will be liable to pay the monetary value of the miscarriage of those aborted fetuses to her husband. Now, the inference is if there would have been an accident, a misfortune that the woman would have died from the accident, then ancient minors. The inference is then there wouldn't have been a monetary payment that the perpetrator would have been obligated to the husband. It's only if the woman didn't die, then he gets punished. But if she would die, he wouldn't be punished. Now, and this takes one step further. Now, although here, if he would have killed the woman, it would have been by mistake, and he had no intention to kill her. He didn't intend to kill her because, as the pasuk there is told about, you have two men that were fighting, and by mistake, when the guy throws something or throws a punch, he hit the woman and not his friend, but he didn't intend for that. Like it says in the pasuk, when you have two people fighting, and then the pregnant woman who was passing by, got collateral damage, got into crossfires, then she got injured. And still you see that the perpetrator would have been exempt had the woman died. So you learn like this. The pasuk does not differentiate regarding that of capital punishment, which is what a murderer usually gets, whether if he did it by mistake, which he's not going to get executed, or whether he did it deliberately, either way, the person can be exempt from the monetary payment, like in that case regarding the value of the aborted fetuses. Now, and so to Bariyo, the pasuk says in Yikro, it says, if someone kills a soul of an animal, he has to pay the payment to the owner. And someone that kills a person, he's going to get executed. Now, we compare. Just when someone kills an animal. The pasuk doesn't differentiate between if he did it by mistake or deliberately. Either way, you're always going to be liable for the monetary payment because there's no death penalty for killing an animal. There's only a monetary payment. And even if someone does it by mistake, he's liable to pay. So the reverse is also of makin nefesh adam. So to someone that kills a person, there's no differentiation between if he does it by mistake or deliberately. That he's always going to be exempt from payment. Because just like we know when you do it deliberately, you're exempt because you can't get two punishments, that of the death penalty and the monetary payment. So that's not only when you do b'mezid, even when you do b'shogeg, you're going to be exempt. And so too says the Rambam, any sin that has capital punishment, that then you are not obligated for the lesser monetary payment. For example, let's say someone injures his friend on Shabbos, which is death penalty because of Chil Shabbos, a mafarik of a wound when he hurt his friend. So even if he did it by mistake, which he would not be chayv misbezin, he would still be exempt from the monetary payment. Now, in contrast, let's say it was a liability of lashes that he did by mistake, where there, if you wouldn't get lashes, actually you would have to pay, like we said before in the Lochid Beis, because the pasuk doesn't compare it shogeg to mezid to exempt him to shulman like we say by makim hema. That's only regarding makim nefesh, regarding chiv mizbezin. Malchus, we wouldn't say that by chiv mizbezin. We do say that even by b'shogeg you can be pater. Halachah tezvav. Now ba'al leha, if let's say regarding a regular Naarah Betulah that is appropriate to him, he cohabits with her, and generally he would be liable for the knas. But then she dies, or he's a pater from the knas, then he's exempt from the knas. Because the pasuk says in the Rambam Mishneh Torah that the man who lay with her will give lavi hanar to the father of the girl, which is lavi hamesa, but not to the father of the dead girl. So, therefore, since she's dead, he has no liability. But this is only if she died before they went to court. But if they already went to court and she already petitioned for the compensation and only then did she die, then he actually would be liable for the kanas because the moment is Amid Bedin, the father already has these rights, and even though she's dead, he can still go ahead and claim the monetary rights for this man, what he did, either Einis Mafata to his daughter.